Now this is a vessel of amazing ingenuity, and unfortunately these things wash up a lot more often than you would like to think, but most of them are not this sophisticated. I mean, this one's got 6 55-gallon drums that are crimped and welded together with what looks like a 2-cylinder diesel engine in the middle of it. And this is what people are willing to get into and ride in for over 100 miles to leave Cuba to make it to America. There are about 7 different ways that a boat is driven through the water, and each one of them has its own advantage for when you would want to have any of the different types of them on your boat. Then there are also about 5 different power options by which these different drives are powered in order to move your boat. Let's start off with a quick and easy one that really kind of covers both the power and the drive systems, being wind. The wind can power a boat that has a sail that then uses a rudder in order to steer it through the water. Wind is great because it's free and doesn't require an engine in order to allow you to move the boat, which is why it can really cover both the drive and power spectrum. The other 7, however, require some sort of external power to allow them to function properly, which is where we get into talking about the other 4 different power options that you will generally find on a boat. These are going to be your gasoline, your diesel, propane, and electric engines, and motors that will power the different types of drives that you can put on a boat. Each one of these power options has its own benefits, like the diesel's advantage of being used to create massive amounts of low-end torque that can move much heavier loads of weight, meaning bigger boats, more people, more amenities, and unfortunately slower speeds. But that's where gasoline comes in. Higher engine RPM, faster speeds, but with the ability to move less weight and less fuel economy. I'm not really sure what the real percentage is, but I'm guessing that about 65 to maybe 80%, if not a little higher, of recreational boats use gasoline power. Then the remainder uses diesel. It's hard to figure in a percentage of the overall boat power market when talking about electric or propane, because electric is relatively new and propane is only used up to about a 25 horsepower engine. So the amount of these engines is a super low number, maybe in the 1 or 2%, if that, of all boat power ranges. The propane power source is a clean alternative, and the electric power is also a really cool clean fuel source as well. Ingenuity is the company that is coming in with the really clean looking electric wake boats, and it's an interesting new side of the boating industry. Now that covers the main sources of power that are going to run all of the different types of drives that you can find on a boat. Now this first drive is not the oldest type of drive, but it does have a section all of its own. So we'll start by covering the outboard first. Outboards have massive advantages when it comes to a choice for a drive for a boat. Outboard engines have the engine and the drive package all built into one, where the rest of the options are going to have separate components that make up the entire system, where you are going to have an engine and then other major components before you hit the prop. Whereas the outboard has it all built into one, and the lower unit that drives the prop is bolted right under the bottom of the engine. Outboards have an advantage because of the fuel efficiency that you get with them, as well as the fact that the way that they handle when it comes to the control aspect of boating is probably the easiest for a beginner boater when comparing all the drive options. You can physically see where the engine is pointing, which is a huge advantage when trying to dock the boat or turn it around in a tight spot, because of the visual reference point that you get when you turn around and see the engine and which direction it is pointing. Another advantage of an outboard is that they are super simple to work on, because everything is right there in front of you, and once you pull the cowling off, the entire engine is sitting there at eye level when the boat is out of the water or on the trailer. This simplicity and ease of access is a huge value point, as well as the simplicity of the process to replace one of these engines when the time or necessity comes, being that there are only 4 bolts that hold the entire engine onto the boat, in comparison to any of the other 5 options, with the exclusion of our next type of drive being the fan power of an airboat. Airboats have a similar advantage in power and drive because the engine is also sitting right in front of you on the deck of the boat. Though the engine style is pretty similar to some of our upcoming options, it does have some differences because of the application for which it is being used. This is because the design of an airboat is for a specific purpose, and not necessarily your conventional style of boating. An airboat's fan power allows it to push the boat across land and water and is primarily used to get back into marshy areas that a normal boat wouldn't get you back into. It adds an extra level of adventure, hunting, exploration, and fun to the world of boating. Being driven by a massive fan blade as opposed to a prop, it's a really cool type of drive option when it comes to boating. Moving on to the next 5 different styles of drives, all of these next types are going to require a similar style of engine. Whether that be a diesel or a gasoline engine, all of them have the engines mounted inside of the boat and will require some sort of transmission in order to convert the engine power to the drive. Starting with a style that is similar to the outboard, let's talk about the inboard-outboard or IO style of drive system. The name gives you an idea of how they are similar to the outboard, because the lower unit and transmission system can be found on the outside of the boat and the engine on the inside. These will steer and maneuver similarly to the outboard, with the exception of not being able to see what direction the drive is pointed in. The drives are mounted on the back of the boat onto the transom. That's why you will commonly hear these called stern drives as well, but IOs and stern drives are pretty much the same thing. Both the stern drives and the outboards have an advantage over any of the other styles we discuss because these drives have the ability to trim the drive and change the angle of the prop, which makes a massive difference when it comes to control and efficiency. But we've got another video here that will show you why that is and how to use it. These are a super popular type of drive system and are still found on many boats today. Though they aren't as popular as they used to be, they are still really prominent in many types of boats, and I don't see them going away anytime soon. One of the similarities between these drives and our next style is the position of the engine. Because the transmission portion of the drive is located on the outside of the transom with the lower unit attached to it, the engine has to be placed in the back of the boat, which, when it comes to a boat, one of the most important things that you have to think about in the type, build, and placement of stuff in the boat is the weight and where it is located, which plays a huge part in the performance of the boat. Our next style also shares the same necessity in the engine location and having it to be in the back of the boat, being the drive power of a jet boat, where the boat uses a jet drive system that sucks up water from under the boat and then uses that water to spray it out of a jet from the back of the boat that then propels the boat through the water. Jet boats have a big advantage in a drive type because they can operate in extremely shallow areas of water. Though they do have the ability to pull water from around 10 feet below the boat, they can still operate in only inches of water. Something that many people probably don't think about with this though is that running them in shallow water, say where there is a lot of grass, they will suck that grass up and clog up, leaving the boat inoperable. But it can be easily cleaned out and make you operable again. These boats have a very different experience than any of the other boats when it comes to controlling and maneuverability. Because they use the force of a water jet stream to propel them, they can get really slidey when it comes to driving them in tight spots or when docking. So that takes some getting used to. Now, because they have the engine in the back of the boat, it's also similar to our next type of drive system, being a pod drive style. Pod drives are the newest type of drive system that you can have on a boat, though they aren't that new and have been out since 2005 when Volvo Penta first came out with the pod drive design of the IPS. They are still an interesting type of drive, where the transmission and lower unit are all incorporated into a pod drive that goes through the bottom of the boat. An interesting aspect of a pod drive is that the entire pod turns all together for the steering, and that the props are generally in the front of the pod, as opposed to behind or on the back of the lower unit. These forward-facing props have an efficiency aspect to them because they are able to hit what is called clean water, and the other styles are all hitting turbulated water when it finally gets to the prop. Though now pod drives can be found on outboards like Mercury's V12 engine, they are more commonly found on diesel inboard engines, which is our next type of drive system, being a true inboard style of boat. An inboard usually has the engines closer to the middle of the boat because they utilize a drivetrain that then has a straight shaft that goes through the bottom of the boat and then has the prop on the end of the prop shaft. These boats will steer a little differently as well from any of the others that we have already discussed because they use a simple rudder system to direct the water flow that is coming from off the prop. Most people will find these and the jet boats to be the hardest types of drives to control when it comes to being able to dock the boat. But because of their design, they are the most proficient type of drive package for water sports. Wakeboard, surf, and ski boats all usually utilize the inboard design of a drive. I think that many people also prefer this design on a boat where people are commonly in the water around the back of the boat because unlike the stern drive where the prop is sticking out the back of the boat, an inboard has the propeller being under the boat, giving a lot of people a more safer and comfortable feeling when there are people in the water and getting in and out of the boat. Just like the inboard, another, what I guess you could call subsection to the inboard system is going to be your V-drive type of system. This is basically the same thing as the inboard with the exception that it uses a transmission system that has the gearbox in front of the engine and then uses basically a V gear system in order to transfer the engine power to the prop shaft that then again is under the boat, and also uses the rudder to direct the water flow in order to steer the boat and control it as you go through the water.